In the long, unhurried sweep of Roman history, there are few figures whose stories drift between fact and rumor as fluidly as that of Valeria Messalina. She was the young wife of Emperor Claudius, and her life became a tapestry of whispers, court politics, and carefully tended legends. To fall asleep to a story is to settle into the slow rhythm of ancient Rome, where marble corridors echoed with the shuffle of sandals and the murmurs of senators, and where power moved quietly beneath the surface, like an unseen current. Rome, at this point in its history, was a place of relative stability after the tumultuous reigns of its predecessors, but the quiet surface masked the reality that power was traded in subtle gestures. The raising of an eyebrow, an overheard sentence, or a favor discreetly offered. Messalina entered this world as a young woman with connections and intelligence, and quickly found herself watched by the eyes of courtiers who understood that proximity to the emperor meant potential authority. Her early years in the palace were marked not by the dramatic episodes later attributed to her, but by the slow, day-to-day life of Rome's elite. Banquets stretched late into the night, with dishes of figs, honeyed wine, and roasted meats placed on tables carved with intricate patterns. Messalina entered this world as a young woman with connections and intelligence, and quickly found herself watched by the eyes of courtiers who understood that proximity to the emperor meant potential authority. Her early years in the palace were marked not by the dramatic episodes later attributed to her, but by the slow, day-to-day life of Rome's elite. Banquets stretched late into the night, with dishes of figs, honeyed wine, and roasted meats placed on tables carved with intricate patterns. Servants moved quietly between guests. The emperor's household operated like a small city, full of scribes, tutors, guards, and advisors, each playing a part in the smooth functioning of imperial life. As time passed, Messalina's presence in political circles grew, and advisors, each playing a part in the smooth functioning of imperial life. As time passed, Messalina's presence in political circles grew. Ancient writers often described her as manipulative, but these accounts must be read through the lens of Roman historiography, which frequently cast powerful women in unflattering tones. Much of her supposed mischief likely came from her involvement in court decisions, something considered unusual for women of her time. To modern readers, the records of her influence hint less at scandal and more at a woman navigating a world dominated by men, where securing her family's position required strategic thinking. Yet historians, such as Tacitus and Suetonius, writing long after her death and shaped by their own agendas, embellished her image, weaving stories that blurred the boundaries between political maneuvering and sensationalism. Still, the imperial court did have its share of plotting. Senators whispered of rival factions, each hoping to steer Claudius in their preferred direction. Freedmen, trusted by the emperor, held enormous influence, much to the frustration of traditional Roman elites. Messalina, like anyone in her position, learned to read the map of loyalties that shifted around her. Those who approached her did so with calculated politeness, offering flattery or information in hopes of gaining her favor. The corridors of the Palatine Hill were places where messages were delivered quietly, and decisions made in private could ripple outward into the entire empire. One characteristic of this era was the constant presence of rumor. Without modern communication, stories traveled by voice, one person repeating what they thought they heard, another adding details they assumed were true, and a third shaping the tale into something more dramatic. Over time, Messalina became a figure easily framed by such rumors. Accounts of her involvement in plots likely grew with every retelling. What began as political disagreements were transformed into accusations of betrayal. The courts of Rome were never neutral spaces. Every figure of influence was a potential tool or threat. Within this environment, Messalina's relationship with her husband developed into one marked by distance. Claudius, absorbed in administrative duties and academic inquiry, often left daily court interactions to those around him. This created gaps in communication that others exploited, offering him carefully curated information that shaped his perceptions. The emperor, though intelligent, relied heavily on the reports of his trusted advisors, many of whom had their own motives. As a result, Messalina's position, though outwardly secure, was vulnerable to the interpretation of her actions by others. The most enduring story from Messalina's life concerns her relationship with Gaius Silius, a Roman nobleman whose reputation for charm and ambition made him a prominent figure in elite circles. Ancient accounts claim that their association grew into a plot to replace Claudius, though the details are murky. It is possible that political unrest among senators, unhappy with Claudius's reliance on freedmen and his marriage, contributed to the spread of these accusations. The Rome of this period was a place where miscommunication could escalate rapidly, and a single rumor could evolve into what appeared to be a conspiracy. The true extent of Messalina's involvement in any political scheme remains unclear, as most surviving accounts prioritize dramatic intrigue over factual accuracy. The height of the tension came when Claudius, away from Rome on official duties, received reports suggesting that Messalina had engaged in disloyal behavior. His advisors, some of whom may have long sought her removal, seized the opportunity to persuade him that decisive action was needed. This moment illustrates the fragility of power in Rome. Even the emperor could be swayed by the voices around him, and judgments were often made quickly to prevent unrest. Upon his return, the situation unfolded with a swiftness characteristic of Roman politics. Messalina, realizing the severity of the accusations, attempted to reach Claudius for an explanation. However, the apparatus of state had already begun moving toward a conclusion. Her final hours, according to the historical record, were spent in a garden belonging to her mother, awaiting the decision of those who now controlled the palace. The version most often retold is filled with dramatic tension. Soldiers arriving, a final refusal to act against herself, and the intervention of a centurion who carried out the sentence. Yet even here, the recounting may be shaped more by the desires of historians to create a moral narrative than by accurate detail. What is certain is that, with her death, the imperial court shifted once more. Claudius, influenced by the same circle that helped orchestrate her fall, soon remarried and continued his rule. After her death, Messalina's name became a symbol in Roman literature, often invoked as a cautionary example of excess and ambition. But when viewed through the softer, quieter lens, suitable for drifting into sleep, her story becomes less sensational and more reflective of the unpredictable nature of life in ancient Rome. She lived in a world where political stability depended on perception, where alliances were fragile, and where even members of the imperial household could be undone by a single rumor. Her tale, when separated from the embellishments that grew around it, is ultimately one of a woman navigating an environment defined by shifting loyalties and immense pressures. It is a reminder that in the vast expanse of history, many figures become symbols rather than full humans. As we let the story fade into the calm of night, it becomes a gentle meditation on the complexity of the past, the quiet corridors of forgotten palaces, and the way history softens into legend over time. In the end, Messalina's life becomes part of the larger tapestry of Rome's imperial era, a period filled with characters whose stories were shaped not only by their actions, but by the perspectives of those who recorded them. Her story drifts into the background like a distant melody, softened by time, leaving behind the faint echo of footsteps in marble halls and the gentle hum of a city that never truly slept. As you settle further into rest, the image of ancient Rome grows dimmer, until it is only a peaceful blur, carrying you quietly into sleep.